I'm Debbie Wagner, and I'm one of the artists for the exhibit Super Kitchen.
And I'm Bill, Peggy's husband, and also an ASS, artist support spouse.
And I'm Becky Hyberger, the third artist for the exhibit Beyond the Super Kitchen. I'd like to begin just speaking about myself and the art that I have created for this show. There are several areas of interest that I draw from when I create my art. The first area is recording and writing down dreams. I have learned a lot about myself, have become more aware of who I am, and have understood the nature of metaphor through recording. I also have a degree in psychology, and my other interest is in miniatures, and I love the idea of creating small spaces to draw the viewer into a deeper contemplation. All of my work is a series of scaled constructions that are related and that deal with the subconscious mind and deal with the illumination or awareness. And I'd like to begin by sharing a couple, three pieces from the original exhibit, The Year of the Super Kitchen, and where the idea came from. This particular piece is called Broken Open, and it is a bird cage with the door slightly ajar. On the interior of the bird cage, there's a light bulb that is shining down, and there are three areas. The bottom of the bird cage are some newspapers, and these are actual reduction of the newspaper that I came across when I was changing my own bird's cage, that there was an article about super kitchens. And so I reduced it, and it sparked an idea in me that it would make a good exhibit. So I reduced it down and put it in the bottom of the cage. Also, I wanted to make another connection with this particular piece was a dream that I had as a child where I visited an old woman's house, and she was in her kitchen creating birds, and she did this by pouring pancake batter in a skillet, and then when she'd flip the pancake over, a bird would flutter up. And of course today I know that the old woman that I visited as a child was me as an adult. Feeding the Soul is the second piece that I did for the original Super Kitchen exhibit. And for many years, Peggy and Debbie and I would meet once a month and share our art ideas, and oftentimes we went to lunch. And so this particular piece represents us. There is a purse in each of the chairs, and that purse is scaled down to approximately an inch to a foot, and they were the original purses that we carried at the time that I made the piece. And of course the three little birds represent us sharing our ideas. As I remarked earlier, the purpose of most of my art is to show how we become aware and where that awareness comes from and what is the subconscious mind. And this piece, Safe Passage, I have tried to illustrate how what is in the unconscious becomes known. At the very bottom, there's a grid of gray cases, suitcases, drawers, boxes that seem like they're almost cemented together. But in the center, there is a column of more colorful cases that rises up. And if you consider that the surface of this piece, the plexiglass, is the barrier between what is in the unconscious mind and what is above. And above, one of the suitcases is slightly ajar, and then there's a butterfly. So this is about the act of transformation and making what is in the unconscious mind known. Related to this piece is one of the original pieces from the Super Kitchen exhibit called State of Mind. In State of Mind, it's a representation of both sides of the psychological mind. The one side is deeper, darker, lower, more analytical, more separated. There is a series of analyzing that goes on this side. The other side is lighter, brighter, pinker, more breezy. There's screen doors between the rooms. There's mirrors for meditation or reflection. In the very center is a black drawer. Actually, this whole center column could be where the opposing sides of the mind overlap. We don't know what goes on in that very center. That has more to do with the subconscious mind. But we do know that there are bees that enter in from the back, and we do know from the opposite side there is honey. So perhaps from this vantage point, the activity of the unconscious mind is hidden. We can only see the result of its work. And then recently, this year as a matter of fact, I made a new piece involving bees again. This piece is called The Pantry, and I exaggerated the height of the pantry, so as if a person would walk in, it would seem to be remarkably tall. And if you notice, on the right is a telephone, a black telephone, and it could represent communication with the other side or the unconscious, which is the center behind the cupboard doors. On the left is a fly swatter, which could be protection, perhaps, from what may come out of the cupboard doors. And then there are some little cubicles of honey, which may be considered as gifts from the unconscious mind. I think of this as a system because on the opposite side there is an opening with bees entering. And then at the very top in the left you can see that there are bees exiting. I have to say that when I first completed this piece, I hated it. The bees, to me, because they are larger than scale, seemed ferocious and almost terrifying, and I wasn't sure if that I could come to grips with the meaning of the piece. Anyway, I'll probably need to sit with it for some time and at a future date be a little more enlightened about the piece. Super Processor is one of my very favorite pieces. It is actually a beehive complex, and if you look at it very closely, you can see that there are 5 honey supers and 3 brood supers. And when I did research on beehive complexes, I realized that each of the compartments was called a super. So that seemed to fit in beautifully with my metaphor for the creative process. The food processor at the very top is made from a radio dial and a fluted cap, and then the very top lid is a button. In the interior of it is an iridescent stone that almost looks like enlightenment. And going around and around the beehive is iridescent thread that give the illusion of activity from the bees. So all of the activity is taking place below the surface in the beehive complex, and then again, what is above the counter here is the outcome or the enlightenment or the illumination or awareness of what happens in the subconscious mind. Private Elevator is my most recent piece, and I wanted to share a theme that runs through a lot of my dreams. It seems like I'm always entering elevators, and I wanted to show that symbolism in this particular piece. I am not sure exactly what the elevator represents, but I can point to some possibilities. I made the elevator into a shower, and a lot of my work anyway, I put what is in the unconscious underneath rippled glass, and I've done that with the elevator. So the assumption is that this is a space or a place in the unconscious. And upon entering the elevator, the luggage is left behind. And for me, luggage represents thoughts, memories, dreams, ideas. They're left outside in the lobby area. The interior of the elevator has a pair of goggles that is hanging on a hook. And if one should happen to enter, and being underwater, if you would put on the goggles, perhaps you could see a little more clearly. So this particular piece represents up and down movement. It is in the unconscious. The fact that it is a shower could mean that there is some sort of cleansing going on. I'm not really sure. And more than likely, in a couple of years, I will have more of a handle on exactly what this piece means.
I just wanted to start off by saying a big thank you to Debbie and Becky for allowing Peggy's work to be included in the final of the series, and that meant so much to her, and to you, Ron, for having the show here at the Sandzén. Peggy's work was inspired by the earth, and that's how she got started with the clay, because it was just a modeling and the touching of the earth, and so much of her work incorporated organics and of that nature. And as I've looked through some of her sketchbooks, she would take a piece like this and she would sketch it out before she made it, and would attach notes specific to certain pieces that had memories attached to them, or where a lot of them, some of the other work, we can walk through, a lot of the other work were made with found objects, and she would write notes of what significance they had to her. And I asked her many times if, when she put a piece together, if it was just a collection of colors and ethics or aesthetics and balance, or if there was specific meaning to the pieces, and almost always the pieces had specific meaning, and then she would round out the piece by the balance and the colors and like that. And this, she had written a specific note about that piece and what that meant to her. And as I have been going through her studio, I took a glance at some of those sketchbooks, and they're very personal, very intimate, and I almost feel like sometimes I'm spying, going through and looking at that. And so I haven't gone through all of them. There's like 12 sketchbooks of a lot of the pieces that she had done. And she she struggled with her art being worthy of being in a place as famous as the Sandzén Gallery or other galleries. And many of her pieces she wouldn't sign on the back. And I would always ask her, even the ones that she would sell, that, you know, you need to put your name on there, be proud of it. And a lot of the reason why she didn't was because she didn't feel her work was worthy. So she, her foundation was in ceramics, and so even the found object pieces have ceramics that she had created, and they all had, you know, she, as every artist does, I think, when they try to come up with names to name their pieces, she really struggled with that and tried to find a representation of what that piece meant to her. I don't have a lot of specific comments on individual pieces because it was so personal to her and her studio. She would go up in her studio and work, and when I retired, we had kind of she would ask me about some of the engineering, about some of the, how to put some of the things together, and I really enjoyed being a part of that process. And she was just, before she passed in January, she was really alive. Her studio is covered with pieces in process, and I don't know what I'm going to do with all that. I go up there and just start crying because I don't know where to begin. So of late, a lot of her pieces had, as I think I heard Becky mention, honeybees. She had a real fondness for the bees and what they meant to us as a humankind, and a lot of her pieces are representative of honeycombs and the bees and the pollen, and that meant a lot to her. A lot of her pieces are just organic shapes and forms that she would come up with. She'd sketch them, and everything had a significance. And I'm sorry, I don't know how to share that with you because I don't know. I can't read into her mind. This particular piece right here was a piece that she had dry assembled. So she would take the pieces and before that she glued them in, she would dry assemble those, and she would take pictures of those and send those to Debbie and Becky and her other artist friend Lori, and get ideas from them and bounce back before she actually glued it together, because that reinforced her confidence in her piece. And so this piece right here has never been put together. It's dry assembled, and there was a lot of interaction with that piece back and forth between the three, and I am going to complete that piece. I think I have enough of her feeling of that piece to actually put the glue to it and finish it, and so I'm working on that. Her pieces were getting bigger. She started with small pieces, and like with some of these, they were getting bigger, and some of them had found objects. I know I can tell you this piece specifically. This towel was a piece that we found on one of our walks, and our youngest son has a scooter shop in Lawrence, and one of the brands that he doesn't sell, but one of the brands of scooters is Tao Tao, and I'm sure that came off of a scooter. And so there was significance to that when she included that in that piece. And same way with this piece here, it just equilibrium was just a balance, you know, the balance of life and nature and how we interact with each other. That's really, this is another one of her pieces, and it's called Journey, and the keys and the spoon and the water heater, and this jaw piece actually came from our barn, I believe, is where we found that. And so and these little ceramic pieces were pieces that she made. So she always tried to incorporate some ceramics in all of her pieces because that was kind of her foundation. This picture right here actually represents her work table up in her studio, and you can kind of see in the background a lot of the pieces. And this piece right here, this whole assembly right here, is that piece that I showed earlier, that I spoke about earlier, that was the dry assembly, and those pieces are coming together into that piece. And then there are other little piles of things that she had dry assembled, and I don't know that I can finish those pieces. I've got pictures of how she wanted them to look, but I'm kind of struggling with. She was very fussy, very particular, and I don't know. It's a big step for me to make that leap. So.
When Becky first presented the theme for the three of us, the super kitchen, we changed it to Beyond the Super Kitchen. I believe that was Peggy's input. And I went home and thought about what the kitchen means to me. And for me, it represents nurturing, comfort, love, friendship. And so the beginning piece I did was this piece called 6 Generations, 7 Women. And it's on an old antique kitchen cupboard door with the portraiture of my 2 daughters, me, my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, my great-great-grandmother. And this represents the woman has been in the kitchen for generations. My 2 daughters continue that generational trek into the kitchen. And the woman is still in the kitchen today, although the man has become more involved in that process of cooking and nurturing and caring from the center of the home. My pieces represent they have a lot of symbolism in them also. So some of my pieces, like the 3 apples that are throughout the exhibition, represent friendships, conversation. I have a lot of pieces that represent conversation among women. The kitchen represents female friendship to me, and a lot of conversation happens in the kitchen between women. This piece actually was inspired by the old game we used to play in Girl Scouts where it was called telephone, and you would whisper into one girl's ear and then she would try and whisper into the next girl, and by the end of the train the conversation was entirely different, and what this girl said doesn't even begin to represent what the last girl heard. The fruit became really important to me when I had brain tumors in 2002. And I realized that the doctors would describe the size of a tumor to a woman by comparing it to a fruit size. Where if a man had a brain tumor, it would be the size of a ball, a golf ball or a baseball. So my tumors were the size of pears, which I started using a lot of pears in my work, and then I noticed that fruit is very symbolic of the feminine body and of females. So I just integrated a lot of fruit into my work. This piece is called Lean on Me, and when I was sick, I had a lot of friends come along and help take care of me and nurture me through their kitchens. And so I found 3 pears that were kind of leaning towards each other, and I painted that. And then from that painting, I've recreated it through many media. And this is extra special to me because I used one scan of yarn that was a multicolored piece, and I just continued it and dropped it onto the felted background and then stitched over the top. And so it never breaks, the thread never breaks. And you can see I've got pieces here and in between, and I just tried to lay it on the fabric so that it has that connection of friendship. From there, I began thinking about how my kitchen represents the environment and my thoughts of the environment. And through our lunches, I realized how important the honeybee was. And my passion for the honeybee began to show up in my artwork. So this piece is the first one I did with the honeybee. This is a piece of an old quilt top that actually dates Civil War period. And I was cutting up this quilt with figurative pieces, and then I took the quilt top to a woman who was like antique roadshow expert on quilts, and she said, "Oh, well, that's a Civil War quilt." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I might as well use it." She said, "You're actually saving the integrity of the fabric because it's so old and ragged." And so I just started cutting out figures from that quilt top. And then the honeybee, I did my own I created my own honeybee, and it's called the Bee Saver. And it's just the importance of our responsibility towards the environment, and how I am daily reminded in my kitchen of the ingredients I use and how important honey is to the pollination of our plants and our whole system of food. Then I feel like the kitchen is also an area of non-sexual sensuality. So we have the taste, the touch, the smell, the sight, and the sound. Whoops. Anyway, all five senses come out of the kitchen, yet we are in complete control of them because we're cooking, we're creating, and we're nurturing from those senses. When I use freeform stitching, sometimes the randomness of the stitch is out of my control, as my life has often been. And so I'll stitch a piece, and then stitches will be out of place, and I have to redefine and figure out how to fit that in so that it looks like it belongs. And that's what I've had to do with my life, and the idea of accepting the imperfect, accepting the parts that I can't control and that are non-defined in my life. This piece began with a large heavily felted piece that was a dancer. It was actually my daughter, and I never liked the piece. And so I had the idea in my mind of a very large female face that was almost cartoonish, and I started just dropping yarn and fabric on top, and she began speaking to me and just materialized. And I stitched and felted her on top of an old piece, and when I was finishing up, I saw this hook, and I accidentally dropped this yellow yarn on top, and it looked like a honeybee to me. Like, oh my gosh, she's also concerned about the honeybee. And so I called it Tending the Honeybee, and I stitched this, I felted it in, and then I stitched it in and put in the honeybee to give her purpose, because I felt like she really needed to have a purpose in life. Beyond the Super Kitchen had its first show at the Lincoln Arts Center in Lincoln, Kansas. And 2 days before that show, I was thinking about the scents, SCENTS, of a kitchen. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is the same sound as sense, SENSE. And then I thought about the three of us and our show, and I decided that I wanted to do a portraiture. And so I took out these old antique kitchen napkins and I started stitching our faces on top. And I think I went till midnight the night before the show and stitched these up. But I wrote kitchen scents, and then I crossed it out and I put scents, S-E-N-S-E. Then I put sugary and sweet, herby and sharp, yeasty and fresh. And I was just thinking of the three of us and our friendship and our influences over each other and the camaraderie of artists and how important that is in creating artwork, and how fortunate the three of us were and are to have each other. And I want to thank the Berger Sandzén Museum for allowing us to have this conversation with the three of us together once again. Thank you.